Good morning. So this will be a quick one because I have to run, but I had started sharing my learnings from Never Split the Difference last week, and wanted to really touch on the area of the brain where empathy lies, because it's the frontal lobe, and it's actually where our executive functions are, where we develop a sense of consequences and analysis and planning, and that's what they call it, the executive functions. But the empathy part of that, I think, is overlooked. So that's one of my favorite topics. So I kind of went down that rabbit hole and didn't go into a lot of I got so many more learnings out of splitting the difference, or Never Split the Difference. I also mentioned something kind of off the cuff about Evie Pompouras, and I just wanted to correct her name because I said it wrong last week. So there's three main negotiator personality types that Chris Voss, the author, talks about. And what's really interesting too, I've been following on Twitter, and in one of his recent Twitter videos, he talks about how those also align with how people respond to threat. So I'm sure you've heard of fight or flight, how, we have it very, deep in our programming to respond to threats as though it's life or death, to either respond by fighting or fleeing. But more recently, a third type of response to threat has also been identified, which is called tend and befriend. Look it up. I think everyone should know about it, not least of which because it is it's a response that reflects female physiology more, female hormonal makeup, and just includes the female body and science, which it's also a topic I'm really interested in, because I feel like so much information out there is based on science focused on the male physiology, simply because research was on that body, the male body, for so many years, and not as much on the female body. So that's a really important issue I care deeply about. And it does relate to this, the negotiation types, because of the accommodator type, especially. So he aligns this response to threat, so like the tending and befriending, to the accommodator type in negotiations. And that's someone who basically is trying to make friends, and that's their negotiation style. Smoothing things over, making, building trust, making things all right, making things more harmonious relationship wise. I just realized I'm bumping my camera and I need to stop doing that. Then there's also the assertive type, which would respond to threat with a fight reaction. And then there's the analytical type, which I guess would be the flight reaction. And one of my main takeaway, maybe my biggest takeaway from the book, well, other than how important building empathy is for any negotiation type, it doesn't matter, like it's something you have to do to connect with people so that you can negotiate. But the other thing is that all three types have something to bring to the table, and that regardless of which one you kind of resonate with the most, you should pull in the strengths from the other two, and I think for myself, like in my own reflections, like I could learn a lot from the assertive type, like having a specific thing you want from others is actually a part of your integrity, because it's like, where you stand, and you can then be very clear about your intentions with others. Not that you necessarily are going to put it all out on the table, although actually you can much more than I think people realize, like, definitely read the books, Never Split the Difference. And yeah, I think for me, like negotiation, it's not that I don't want something from people, but a lot of times I don't care so much about the specifics as long as we're going toward the direction I want, you know? And it's true. A lot of times, like side by side, those two goals, like side next to that goal is also my goal of just building a relationship. That's always kind of a factor, I think, you know, for everyone, but I think especially for the accommodator type, which I definitely resonate with the most and got the most out of when I was reading this book, like in terms of understanding myself. So yeah, like learning from the assertive type, like to just, like one of the things he also talks about doing is before you negotiate to actually do a brainstorm of all the different scenarios that might be the result and identify the best case, you know, and really go for it. And that really helped me because a lot of times I don't really derive energy from goals. It's not that I'm not goal oriented, but I don't necessarily care about a specific goal as long as the outcome is right, as long as we're making the type of change that we're going for. And I've struggled with this a lot in terms of, people want specifics, and that takes a lot of emotional energy on my part that, I don't necessarily have quickly at my disposal. I'm always kind of amazed at people who immediately know exactly what they want, and yeah, I think like doing a brainstorm or just, I like working on teams for that reason, because usually there's someone on the team that's probably the assertive type and they know, well, we should go for this. And that is helpful to me, not necessarily that I'll just do whatever they say. Like I think a lot of times my type is perceived as like the weak type or the submissive type, that's horrible. And I've gotten that kind of feedback from people before in the past too. And or like really bad advice, like never say you're sorry, that's weak, and things like that. I think that's really bad. And actually in the book, he talks about how saying sorry is not a sign of weakness. And I was kind of like, yay, validation, because I feel like sometimes it's extremely helpful to say you're sorry because it's a way of acknowledging you misunderstood something or there was an important point the person's trying to make, and you're like fully acknowledging them and not trying to avoid an apology or an admission of guilt. It's like, well, just admit it. It's not guilt. It's just you're acknowledging that person. And I've always kind of believed that and followed that. And yeah, no, you shouldn't overly apologize and like apologize for yourself. Like, that's also kind of off-putting, too. So, that's why I think, like my sister says, all advice is just feedback. Like you don't necessarily take the actual advice. You just kind of say, well, why are people perceiving me this way? And I think probably because I'm the accommodator type, I seem to be, I don't even want to say those negative things, but people kind of misperceive me or whatever. And it's not that I just want to, give up, but it's that I am willing to go in multiple directions. That's actually kind of a superpower for negotiation, being willing to walk away from a deal if it's just not totally just not meeting your base requirement is the major key. I've always been good at that. So, that's a strength. And then the other thing is like not being so attached to a specific scenario. Sometimes you never know. I mean, it may actually end up being better than you had imagined. So it's really important to be a little bit open-minded in negotiation, and I have that in full suit. So yeah, I think it's really these three personality types, and also looking at kind of psychology in terms of how people respond to threat, but also including the tend and befriend. and maybe understanding those perspectives better, I think would be much more helpful for people like myself. Often, I think probably we're women, not always. But I think it's super useful for me anyway. So I just wanted to share about, I thought that was a really interesting alignment between how we respond to threat and how we negotiate, because I think all of these things when it comes to communication are so core to humans, and because we're social and our brains are developed socially, our minds are developed socially and in constant connection with our environments as well. We're not, we're not as like individualistic as we perceive, I think, especially in Western culture. So yeah, really interesting. And I thought I'd just pop on really quick and share that. So yeah, it's been 11 minutes. I think that's good. So I'm going to end the broadcast. Oh, I guess I should mention this is the We're Nearly There podcast episode. No wonder it was so short. I didn't even give the introduction. So I'm Melinda McClymans, and this is the We're Nearly There podcast. And I've started just doing these more spontaneous sessions on Wednesday mornings because I can squeeze it in with a lot of projects I'm working on these days. So thanks for understanding the informality, and I hope you enjoyed.